All right, and sorry. All right, well, so I'm excited to be back. Well, not really, but I was in Hawaii all last week, so yeah. So I'm excited to be with you guys. I'm not excited to. I wish we were in Hawaii doing this.
Yeah.
It was quite awesome, but
That would be cool.
yeah, it'd be awesome.
We'll
So
be with you next year.
next year, I love it. That's
Yes.
good.
We'll just bring Hawaii vibes here now.
Yes,
And we're there.
I'm good with that. Yeah, it was awesome. So here's what we're going to cover today. So today what we're going to talk about, today's the activities management class, but what we're going to actually cover is it's kind of a time management kind of a thing. I never advertised the class as, hey, it's a time management class, because then nobody would want to show up. But here's what I will tell you is I'm going to give you a tool that if you will use it, will help you either one, get your business up off the ground if you're new, or two, if you're not, it'll help you take your business to the next level. And this tool that I'm going to provide to you is going to help you at any time. So like I'm a big baseball fan, and which is the season started last week, and I haven't watched one game yet. So I don't know how much of a fan I really am, I guess. But here's the thing. In baseball, though, it's not uncommon for a hitter to get into a slump. Well, the same type of a thing happens in real estate is that agents can feel like, I'm in a slump. So the tool that I'm going to give you today as well will be something that you can use to get out of a slump. So if you ever feel like you're in a slump, immediately you want to start to use this tool and it'll help you get out. So now with that in mind, what I'm going to actually show you though I first got to put a few pieces in place to help you understand. Then we can get into how do we use this tool and what is it and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So I got a screen share thing or a PowerPoint that I'm going to pull up here. 1 second. To go through some of this other information with you. So it's turned on. All right. What's up? Good. All right. I'm going to turn off the lights. That's probably a little easier to see. Okay, so here's what we're going to start with. Is I want to start by talking to you guys about this guy by the name of C. Northcott Parkinson. So anybody ever heard of him? Because my assumption is no. I don't think every time I've ever taught this class, I don't think I've ever had anybody go, oh yeah, I know who he is, so I don't expect you to. But I'm going to tell you about who this guy is. So C. Northcott Parkinson was working on his PhD thesis in the 1930s. So in the 1930s, he's in England, he's working on his PhD thesis, and part of what he did was he was studying the Royal Navy, and he was studying basically of what was going on with the Royal Navy, and as a result of that, he came up with a few principles. So we're going to talk about two of the principles that he came up with. The first one is what is called Parkinson's Law of Expansion. Okay. Now, what he found as he was doing this, in fact, actually, let me even back up. So to some extent, this guy, C. Northcott Parkinson, is probably the father of business consulting. So meaning when businesses go out and hire a consultant to come and help them figure out how to make more money, this guy is kind of the father of that whole process. And where it came out of is him working on his PhD thesis. So as he was studying the Royal Navy, what he found was this. So we're going to talk about two of these laws that he came up with. And the first one is his law of expansion. And here's what it says, is that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Now, you may not have ever heard that before, but you've understood it. Meaning like when you were in school and you had a homework project that you had to work on, you typically would end up working on it till the last minute. And the reason for that is because of what he figured out here, which is work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So you and I, if we say to ourselves, I am going to show up to the office tomorrow, and I'm going to be there from 8 a.m. till 6 o'clock, whatever it is, whatever time you say, you will show up to the office and work will expand so as to fill that time available for that. Now, so last week in the class, Jason talked about, so Trey had mentioned that he talked about the activities section, the contact section, all of those kinds of things. So for me, when I first started as an agent, I treated it like a job, meaning that I said, okay, I'm going to show up to the office every day at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd get there at 9, and I would say I'm going to stay there till 5 o'clock at night, and then I'll go on whatever other appointments and things that I had. Well, this process is what would happen, meaning I would show up and be at the office, and I would be there from 9 o'clock until 5 or 6 or whatever the time was, and I would figure out things to do to stay busy until it was time to leave. Well, so the other thing that this says, what he found as part of this work expands to fill the time available for its completion, is this, and this applies to real estate. There is no correlation between time spent at work and productivity. So I'm going to keep referring back to that to you guys, because that, for me, this was life-changing, or at least career changing in terms of making money in real estate, was when I understood this. There is no correlation between time spent at work and productivity. So really, that's kind of the same thing. I'm saying it a different way, but that's what he figured out, is the work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. There is no correlation between time spent at work and being productive, meaning you could be very, very productive in this business and not really have to work a ton of hours, is really what that comes down to. And so that's where we're going to get into, is so how do we do that? Well, one of the things you're going to notice as we go through and talk about this, I am never going to tell you this is how many hours you need to work, but I am going to tell you how to be productive in whatever that time looks like. Okay. So the first thing that we have to understand is work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. If you tell yourself you're going to be here for a certain amount of time, you'll be here and you'll figure out busy work to do it. But that's not the same thing as being productive. Okay. All right. Next. So how he figured this out was through this. So as I mentioned, he was studying the Royal Navy. What he found is in 1914, the number of ships that the Royal Navy had in commission was 62. They had 146 officers and men in the Royal Navy. There were 57,000 dockyard workers. The dockyards and officials and clerks, 3,200. The Admiralty officials was 2,000. Well, then notice 14 years later, they go from having 62 ships to down to having 20. So it reduced by 67% the number of ships they had in commission. Notice the officers and men that were in the Royal Navy went down 30%. But then as soon as we shift over to dockyard workers, the officials and clerks, the Admiralty. So think of it this way. Think of this as being in terms of the, if you're thinking about a business, that this is the upper management. So notice what happens. The number of ships that they had in commission goes down 67%, but the upper management goes up 78%. So now why? Now, if you can understand why this happens, that even though the ships went down, the number of officers, the number of officers went up. When you understand that, it'll make a whole lot of difference in terms of you and how productive you are in your business. So why did this happen? Why did the number of ships go down? Well, don't worry about why the ships went down. Basically, World War I was over, okay, is why that went down. But why did the number of the officials, the top level of management, why would it go up when the ships went down?
Did it cost less to have managers managing everyone else who was doing all the work?
Okay, you're on the right track.
Okay.
You're on the right track. What other thoughts? Why would you have to have more people here when the number of, I mean, you would think if the number of ships went down, we don't need as many people. And that is true what happened with the officers and men, but dockyard workers went up, the dockyard officials and clerks. So notice the higher up the level of management went, the more it expanded.
Work that was being done,
Okay, yeah, but why? You're right. Why?
because they have that skill set, that mindset at that level. And they were making sure everyone was doing the productive work.
Okay, good. You guys are on the right track. So let me say, I'm going to say it slightly different. You're on the right track. Okay. Basically what happens, and this happens in any business, and remember, for those that have been through the business planning, for me, for you guys, you are business owners. You're not self-employed. You guys are now business owners. If not managed carefully, any business, I don't care what it is, every business out there, if it's not managed, what happens is we create busy work. So kind of what you guys were saying is right, is in meetings, what happens is that the upper management will sit down and start talking about, okay, well, so what should we do? Well, and then somebody will say something along the lines, you know what we ought to do is we ought to create this division over here that's going to do da 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 da. And then all that does is that creates, well, then we need to get some managers to do that. And then we're going to need a few more people to actually do that. Like work expands to fill the time available for its completion. If not managed, what will happen with you? So now let's bring it to you in real estate. If you don't manage it carefully, what will end up happening is you'll start to have ideas of, oh, I wonder if I went and if I started to do this and just fill in the blank, if that would all of a sudden help me do, like, and so it creates more work for us that may not necessarily lead to more production. Does that make sense? You following me?
So it wasn't a good thing that they had more managers.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so I thought that was,
Because we're backwards.
yeah.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so they grew backwards.
Yeah, but yes, thank you. That's a good way of saying it. Is what happens is instead we create all this work, but there's no increase to production.
Right.
Yeah. So there's not a correlation between time spent at work and being productive. And just you have to manage and be careful because you guys already know you got people coming at you from all over the place of come sign up for this and we'll provide you these leads and you just got to pay this, or all of those things that if not managed, you'll turn into this. Okay, good. So that's the first piece. Second piece. So the next law that he figured out is what we call the law of triviality. Okay. And the way he figured it out is a little different than how we're going to apply it, but the principle is still the same. And here's what it is. What he's found is that when he was studying the Royal Navy and he would go to their meetings that they have, and so this would apply to us in terms of meetings as well, but I'm going to show you how this applies to you in terms of making money in real estate. But what he found was this, that time spent on any item of an agenda was in inverse proportion to its importance. So basically what that means is that, and pay attention the next time you go to a meeting that they give you an agenda, you will see this play out all the time. And quite honestly, if I am not conscious of it, I will do this exact same thing. Even though I know this and what I'm showing you, if I don't consciously think about it and stop and go, okay, hold on, because naturally the way yours and my brain works is to do this. Time spent on any item of an agenda will be in inverse proportion to its importance. Basically what it means is this. Anytime that you go to a meeting that there's an agenda, what typically will happen is we think, let's put the things that are not important first so we can hurry and get them out of the way so that we can spend a bulk of the meeting talking about the important stuff. But that's not typically what happens, okay? And so what he found though is this, is time spent on any item will be in inverse proportion to its importance. Now I'm going to show you how that relates to us in just one second. But first I got to tell you about one other principle and then give you one story. So the next thing we're going to talk about is something called the Pareto principle. You know this, you just haven't heard it as the Pareto principle probably, but it's the 80-20 rule. Okay, and what this was discovered by a guy by the name of Vilfredo Pareto. Vilfredo Pareto was an Italian economist. And what he found was that 80% of the production in these factories in Italy would come, there's 80% of the production would come out of 20% of the factories. And 20% of the production would come out of 80% of them. So now let me explain how that works with real estate. In terms of real estate agents within a company, the money that a company makes, so that Everest makes, 80% of the money that the company makes comes off of 20% of the agents. So there's very few agents that actually really are making money for the company. The other 80% of the agents generate 20% of the income. Okay, so that's one piece. But now let's talk about it in terms of you in real estate. 80% of the money you make in real estate will come from 20% of the activities that you do. Meaning that most of the money you're going to make is going to come out of very small things that you do, and that 20% of the money you make will come out of the other 80% of the things that you do. So there are a few things that are highly important that we got to do, and there's a whole bunch of things that we do that don't really contribute much to our income. Okay, so this is what that would look like, is if each of these blue bars on here represented an activity that you do in real estate, 2 out of these 10 will generate 80% of the money that you're going to make. But this red line represents the amount of time we spend on those activities. And we spend very little time on these 20% that make a huge impact on our income. And we spend a whole bunch of time on the other 80% of the things that really don't make us any money. But we spend a ton of time there. So that's where we're headed with this, is to show you. Now, so with that in mind, let me go back to C. Northcott Parkinson. Time spent on any item of an agenda will be an inverse proportion to its importance. The amount of time you spend on things in activities, which is why we call this the activities management class, the time you spend on the activities will be an inverse proportion to their importance. You're going to spend a whole bunch of time on things that really aren't going to make a whole lot of impact to you, but you'll spend very little time on the things that are going to make you a ton of money. So now remember, let me tie this back together. Remember, I started this by saying I'm going to give you a tool that's going to show you either how to get your business up and running, or how to be more productive and make more money in less time, or go to the next level. This is what we're talking about. This is how we're going to do it, is because we spend very little time on the things that actually generate and produce income, and we spend a whole bunch of time on the things that really don't add money to us. And so I'm going to show you, how do you differentiate that? How do we keep track of it so that we can be more effective? Because there's no correlation between time spent at work and productivity. Everybody good?
Yes.
Questions? Okay. All right. So now let me give you an example of this with the Boston School District. Now, if any of you, I don't think any of you have seen me do this. I don't know if anybody on Zoom has. So if so, just don't give away the punchline if you know where I'm headed with this. Okay. All right. So I'm giving you an example of this. Time spent on any item of an agenda is in inverse proportion to its importance. This is an example. So the Boston School District. The Boston School District was having a meeting. Now, who makes up school boards? Who are the people who end up being on a school board? Do you guys know?
The parents or the community.
Yeah, typically it's more the parents who want to get involved, and so they'll run to be elected to these positions. So keep that in mind as we go through and talk about this, because as long as you understand that this is not necessarily people who have always spent a ton of time in business or anything, but these are parents that just want to get involved and see their kids be successful and safe and all those things. Now, so here's what happened, is the Boston School District was having a meeting, and in this meeting that they were having, they had 2 items on an agenda. Okay, so there were 2 items they were going to discuss. It was supposed to be an hour long, this meeting. One of the items was a $1.5 million annex. So they were going to be spending $1.5 million on expanding basically one of the schools. Okay. The other item, which I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but was a $200,000 item. Now, the interest, the difference, not the interest, the difference between the high bid and the low bid on the $1.5 million item was $200,000. So this bid that they had gotten to have this annex done on the school, the difference between the high bid and the low bid was $200,000. Okay. The second item that they were going to be discussing was a $200,000 item, and the difference between the high bid and the low bid on it was $10,000. Okay, so two items they were going to discuss in a 1-hour meeting. This one item they put on the agenda first, the $200,000 item, because their thinking was the difference between the high bid and the low bid is $10,000. Let's hurry and talk about it really fast. Then we can spend the rest of the meeting talking about this $1.5 million item, where the difference between the high bid and the low bid was $200,000. So here's what happened. Is they spent 57.5 minutes talking about the $200,000 item that had the difference between the high bid and the low bid of $10,000. They ended up taking the low bid of, so they saved $10,000. They then spent 7.5 minutes. So now let me make sure you guys heard what I said. They spent 57.5 minutes talking about this. They took the low bid. They then spent 7.5 minutes. So the meeting went over because it was supposed to be an hour long. They spent 7.5 minutes discussing this item, and they took the high bid. Get rid of these controls here. They took the high bid. Okay. So they spent 57.5 minutes talking about this to take the low bid, 7.5 minutes, and they went to the high bid. Now, again, this is one of those things, if you can understand why they did this, the reasoning behind it, it'll help you understand a whole lot about yourself as well. Because remember, the people on the school board are just everyday people, you and I, okay? So first off, what do you think they were talking about for 57.5 minutes that they saved $10,000 on? So what would you guess they were talking about? It's a very simple item. I'll say it that way. Maybe even more simple than that.
Oh. Paper.
Erasers.
I know, right?
Paper is close. Oh, why is it not? Oh, I think
Oh,
Paper. Of course.
So now here's the thing. If you can understand why they did this, this is going to make a big impact. They spent 57.5 minutes talking about toilet paper. And at the end of that 57.5 minutes, they decided to go with the low bid. Then they spent 7.5 minutes talking about this $1.5 million annex, and they then select within 7.5 minutes to go with the high bid. Now, why did they do that? Why? Yeah, tell me your name.
I'm Shauna.
Shauna, okay.
My guess is where they place value, really, like what they felt was more valuable to them in the long run and important.
Okay, so why would you say that they thought that toilet paper was more important than the building?
Because they personally have to use it every day.
Okay, you're on the right track. Good. Did
Me?
yeah? Tell me your name.
Michelle.
Michelle. Okay.
I was just gonna go off of what she said. Like, toilet paper is easy to take a low bid on because it's not as important. It's like like you said, what did you call it again?
Simple.
Yeah, simple item. So that's, like they're gonna spend most of their attention talking about that simple item so that once they get into the more important stuff, it makes more sense to go the higher route.
Now,
with
why?
that.
You're okay. Good. You're on the right track. So why? Why does it make the more sense to go with the higher?
Quality.
Trey?
I was gonna say, the more used to toilet paper versus the building, they're all parents, they don't really maybe have that field of expertise, but they're just like, we'll just.
Perfect. That's exactly right. So I'm going to say that again. How many of you are familiar with toilet paper and could argue as to, like, in fact, actually, I mentioned getting back from Hawaii. My wife, we got home early yesterday morning. My wife told me, yet I can't remember if it was last night or today. Anyway, she's like, I used our toilet paper and it was so nice compared to the hotel. Like, we have experience with this. We are, so here's,
I'm taking the high bid.
that's right. Yeah, see,
They
that's
were
what's funny.
Yelling at them.
So here's the thing, is that we're all familiar with this. We know we can argue effectively as to one ply, two ply, the softness, the blah, blah, blah. We're all familiar with it. But as Trey said, how many of you are familiar with the building codes and understanding earthquakes, this and straps and the. So stop and think about it for a minute. If you are the parents, you're just the everyday people that, like Trey said, you don't have experience in this. We trust the people who gave us the high bid. So, but here's the key thing. Now, and this is the part that is most important for you to make sure you understand. The whole reason this happens is because they're familiar with this. You and I are comfortable spending time with things we're familiar with. But the things that we're not familiar with, we're not comfortable with. Therefore, in this meeting, they can spend 57.5 minutes. Now, remember, the idea, when they set this up, they would have set up the agenda to be, okay, we'll just hurry and knock this out real quick so that we can have the majority of the meeting to discuss and figure out where to go here. But what happens is, because we're familiar with it, we will sit and talk about this and argue about the toilet paper for 57.5 minutes because nobody wanted to really talk about this. That's what that's the key piece for you to understand of this. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So because they were not comfortable with this, they let the work expand, talking about toilet paper, something they're familiar with, to fill the time available for the meeting. Then they have to hurry and cruise through this and they go, well, let's just go with the high bid because they're again, we're talking about this as parents and their kids are in the school. We want to make sure the school is built and it's strong and it's safe for our kids. So they go with that. You and I do the same thing. So in terms of real estate, what are the things that you are most familiar with? So now let's talk for a minute about just for you and I, we're going to do that same thing. Work will expand so as to fill the time available for its completion. We will tend to put the least important things first and the most important things last and least. So in terms of real estate, what are the things that you're most familiar with? What's the toilet paper for you in terms of real estate?
Showing houses.
Okay, good. Typically, like going out and showing houses. Okay, what else?
Writing contracts,
Doing what?
filling out contracts.
Well, actually, so for you guys that are newer, how comfortable is filling out a contract right off the bat?
I'm still asking questions.
Okay, so I'm not sure I would say totally on filling out the contract, but maybe, what?
Prospect.
Yeah, no, that's not. So, but like, was anybody nervous to come to class today? Was anybody like scared to come to class? So how about coming to class is something we're familiar with? And in fact, especially early on, we feel like, well, I need to go learn, because in real estate school, did they teach you how to sell real estate? What did they teach you how to do?
The laws.
Yeah, pass the test. So it's in terms of real estate, like coming to class is familiar. Okay, what other things would be familiar to us that you would be
Checking
comfortable?
emails,
Yes, checking email. What else?
posting on social media,
Yes, social media. Good.
Talking to your friends and family.
Is that comfortable? I hope it is.
Depends on the person.
Yeah, I hope it is for you, but what I found is for most agents, that's not comfortable, is they feel like they're bugging their friends and family. So, okay, good. What else would be familiar?
Taking notes, lots of notes.
Okay, taking
Yeah,
notes, good.
learning.
Yeah, all the
Reading
learning
books.
stuff. Notice that. Notice, how about just going and talking to an agent that's walking by and asking them some questions? All of those things are the things we're familiar with. Now, remember, going back to this, these are the things that we're going to spend a lot of time on, but how much money? Now, I don't want to take away from the idea, like, don't everybody get up and leave class, because I think it's important that you're here in class. So don't hear that. But if all you did all day long was go and take classes, how much money are you going to make in this business? Yeah. So like, we have to sharpen the saw. Like, I sometimes do get worried because there are some agents that get a deal or a couple deals, and then I never see them come into class again. And I'm kind of always like, you need this still, like, just because you got a deal, like, what happens when it closes and whatever. But just notice though, the things that we are most familiar with, that we will let take up our time during the day, are also most of the time the things that are not going to generate income as much to you. Like, they'll contribute to 20% of it. Okay. All right. So what are the things we're least familiar with?
Prospecting.
Yeah, typically that's where it's at. And going back to that other chart again, that's where really your income is going to come from, is that those are part of the 20% of the activities that are going to generate 80% of the money. Okay, so good. Any thoughts, comments on all of that? Okay, good. So now I'm going to introduce you to this tool that I told you that I'm going to provide you with. It's what I like to call a tip analysis. Although I did have somebody tell me one day, so TIP is an acronym, and I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a sec. Somebody one day said maybe I should call it pint, because there actually is an N involved, and I'll show you that. But so far, I'm still sticking with it being a tip analysis. So we're going to talk about a tip analysis. And this is what you can use to help not only get your business up and running, but also is going to help you to know how effective are you being, or excuse me, how productive are you being with your time. Now, in fact, I've never done this actually, but just out of curiosity, and Aiden, you've been through this class, right? So don't answer.
I'm literally texting Derek. I'm like, this is the one. Like, you got to be here for this one. So,
And he's right behind you.
yeah, exactly. Because on the way up,
I was just going to say, which Derek are you talking about?
This is the one, you know, I want to be kind of straight.
Okay,
Yeah.
so with the exception of Aiden, because he might know the answer, what portion of your day, if you had to tell me a percentage, what percentage of your day would you say you're productive? In terms of real estate, not,
Oh, real estate.
yeah, sorry, not just life in general, but real estate, productive. Okay, well, let's do this then. Our top agent in Utah is an agent by the name of Brian Burnett. He's down in St. George. What would you guess the percentage of his day is productive? Now, I don't know his exact numbers of what, but I know in general, the top producing people, what their productivity looks like. So I'm going to be able to tell you pretty close to what he is, even though I don't know exactly what his is.
80%.
Okay,
Yeah, that's 85.
85,
I think it's probably around
50,
Yeah,
okay,
I would say lower.
okay.
Because you're saying his whole day, what
Well,
percentage of that whole day? is
So what
productive?
I'm defining it as when he's working. So like,
Oh.
meaning like of his work day, what percentage of it would be spent productively?
I'm just going off the 80-20 thing.
Okay.
So 80%.
Okay. What about the rest of you? What do you think? What do you think, Jeremy?
Maybe it's 90%. To
Okay.
100%.
60.
60%? Okay. You guys are all going to be surprised. Typically, top producing agents are only productive about 33% of the time. So and what I'm going to show you actually, well, let me finish this off and then I'll show you. What I'm going to show you is why that is. And here's the good news. So when I asked for you guys, my guess is if we were to average out your time spent at work and what percentage is productive, meaning that 80%, the 80% of the activities, or excuse me, the 20% of the activities that contribute to 80%, is that you're probably spending less than 10% of your time in those areas, would be my guess.
I agree.
So, and here's why, because most just agents that are productive, not top producers, but productive agents that make a living in this business are probably only productive 11% of the time. 11%. So here's the good news. If you can just increase that a little bit, it's not linear. Meaning that if you increase it by 2%, your income won't increase by 2%. It'll probably increase by 20%. Okay, so that's the good news. All right, so now how do we get there? So the T stands for total time. Now, remember, I told you, I am not going to ever tell you, here's how many hours you need to work. You're never going to ever hear that from me. I'll never tell you that. But you do need to know what it is, okay? And I'll show you how to use this formula to figure it out. So I'm going to get to Jeremy. Okay, so the T in tip analysis stands for total time, okay? The I talks about indirectly productive. Now I'm going to give you a definition for all of these things shortly here too. So I is for indirectly productive, and the P would equal productive time, okay? And then there is an N, which is why I was saying, somebody said you should just call it a pint analysis. And I've just called it a tip analysis for so long that I don't know. I can't quite get myself there. But N is non-productive. Now, you're going to hear me say this over and over and over again today. Non-productive does not mean not important. Okay, there is a difference between not important and non-productive. Non-productive, you're going to, well, so let me say it this way. I said to you that the top producing agents are spending probably a third of their time productive. So 33% of their time is productive. They are still probably spending, in terms of a non-productive time, probably somewhere about a third of their time is non-productive. So remember, non-productive does not mean not important. So here's how I usually define that. Sitting here in this class, based on these definitions, I would say it's non-productive, but it's important. So it's not that it's not important, it's just non-productive. And here's how you want to think about it. For me, the way I define non-productive is if you did that activity all day, every day. So again, if all you ever did is go to class, your whole career in real estate was spent in class, how much money would you ever make? Zero. You might be the smartest person in the whole world, but you're still not going to make any money. That's for me what this productive is this is how I make my money. So money is made in the productive area. We have to do non-productive things in order to do that, and we have to do indirectly productive to get there, but these are the items. Okay, so with that, oh, oops, I started to give away the answer. All right, so if you maybe saw some of that. So let's talk about what is productive, okay? So there are going to be only a few things that you do in real estate that are going to be deemed as productive, okay? So what would those things be? Okay, actually prospecting is not productive.
Showing houses.
Prospecting is indirectly productive.
So meetings, appointments.
Okay, perfect, good. Yeah, so listing appointments would be productive, okay? A buyer appointment is productive. Showing property to a buyer who has signed a buyer broker agreement is productive. Showing property to a buyer without a buyer broker, I would call that indirectly productive. It's not productive. Now, why?
You don't have their loyalty necessarily.
Yeah, good. So in my mind, the way I look at that is, in my mind, you're still prospecting them.
Right.
Until they've signed an agreement with you, you're still prospecting them. And remember, all prospecting is indirectly productive. All prospecting is indirectly productive. Okay, so showing property to a buyer who's signed a buyer broker agreement, productive. Getting a price reduction, which in today's market, we aren't doing a whole lot of that, but that would be productive. And writing offers would be productive. Okay. And then the final one is negotiating offers is productive. Now, let me ask you a question. What do all of those things have in common? There's two things that I would say, one for sure, but two that they have in
It's
common.
securing the bag.
Say more. What do you?
I got you. Yeah,
Yeah.
You're right.
Right? You're basically ensuring, yeah, ensuring your paycheck.
Okay, and say more about that. How? You're right. You're right on. I'm just trying to get you to connect it a
Elaborate.
little more.
Like you're on the track to, like you're already on track to
Why?
like having a deal because you have a contract already. You're working the contract.
So good.
You're
So
getting
what are
things
you
done.
expecting to have? So let me ask it this way. What should happen at the end of every one of these meetings?
A close.
Yeah, good. Signature. That's what I'm looking for is notice when you go on a listing appointment, what do you want to have happen at the end? They sign the agreement. You do a buyer appointment. What's your objective of that?
An agreement.
To get them to sign the buyer broker. You go out and show properties. What do you want them to do?
So
Write an
you're gonna
offer, which is be down here. Price reduction. What are you helping to have happen?
An agreement.
That they sign it. So notice every one of these things. So the two things that I'm saying I want you to connect here is the most productive things you can do in this business are these things. And every one of these things involves somebody signing something at the end of the meeting. So notice that the most productive thing you can do with your time is spend it. I like to say it as face-to-face, although over the last 2 years, we've incorporated Zoom a lot, but for the most part, you're face-to-face in a selling situation. Okay, you're face-to-face in a selling situation where you're expecting to get a signature at the end of the meeting. Make sense? That's productive. So now let me tie this back together. Remember when I said the top producers are only 33% of the time productive? This is why. Because even with everything they're doing, they're still probably only spending 33% of their time in face-to-face scenarios where they're going to ask somebody to sign something at the end of the meeting. But that's where we make our money. Okay. All right. Oh, I forgot the most important one I left off, closing actually. So at closing would be productive as well because they're signing there. See, every one of these things, you're getting them to sign something. That's the most productive thing you can do.
You should have like a double productive category, because like I said, closing and like accepting offers or like direct money-making activities. Not like, writing an offer, yeah, it's productive, but you have to like write an offer, then accept an offer, then move through the process of an offer. So you should probably like split them into productive,
yeah.
like
Well, because
productive
you're
and
right.
money-making productive.
Yeah, if you could spend all day, well, really, if you could spend all day, every day doing this, like just going from one closing to the next, that would make a ton of money. So you're right. These are somewhat in inverse order maybe of their importance. So yeah, that's a good point. All right. Indirectly productive, which I already pretty much told you the answer to this, but what's indirectly productive?
Prospect.
Our prospecting. That's it. Okay. And then what's non-productive?
Everything else.
Everything else. Yep. Anything that is not under the productive area or prospecting is non-productive. Now remember, I'm going to keep saying this. That doesn't mean it's not important. You still got to do non-productive things. Okay. All right. Now, here's where we're going with this. If you could have your time spent, the amount of time you spend in real estate, if 60% of your time can be between productive and indirectly productive time, you're going to make a ton of money in this business. So notice, I'm still going to allow for you to have 40% of your day spent non-productively. And that would include the non-important stuff too. But mostly, let's just say non-productive, meaning some of it's still important. But if 60% of your time can be spent between these two areas, you're going to make a lot of money in this business. So, and I'm going to show you more. We're going to do more of this in a second here. I'm gonna put the screen up and write on the board.
Are you talking about 60% of your work day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just your, yes, thank you. Well, all of this that I'm talking about would be just defined as when you're quote unquote working.
Yeah.
Like if you take a day off, it doesn't count towards it. Or you took half the day off, you wouldn't count. Yeah, does that make sense? All right. Yeah, and so this, the last thing here, if you're spending less than 60% of your time between indirectly productive and productive, you need to spend more time prospecting, is really what it boils down to. Okay. All right, so let's run through. Now I'm going to do this on the board later. All right. Let me turn this off, get the screen up. Lights on. All right. So now let's go through what we're going to talk about this a little bit. Okay. So here's how I like to think about this in terms of the your time spent there. I like to think of it this way. This would be non-productive. So this is our end time is non-productive. Anywhere on this axis is non-productive. Okay. This axis would be the productive time. So the more time we spend going this direction is productive. Okay. This we haven't talked about and won't. Anything going this direction would be counterproductive, which that's the only thing I'm going to say about that is counterproductive. So here's non-productive, here's productive. Typically what we're going to do is something like this. And I usually like to kind of draw it like train tracks here. I don't know why, but this one is indirectly productive. So what has to happen is this. If you thought about those items that I have written up there as being productive, listing appointments, buyer appointments, all of those things, how do you get those?
By doing indirectly.
That's right. So notice, like as much, if we could spend our whole entire day, we already said going to one closing to the next, like honestly, that would be the ideal. If I were to lay out for you what your ideal path in real estate would look like, ultimately you would spend all day, every day, just going from one closing to the next. Like honestly, if you could somehow create that to where all you do is all day, every day, leave from one closing to the next, or maybe even have it scheduled to where they're just coming to you. So you're just sitting there at your desk and people are coming in and signing closing documents one after the next. Like that would be the perfect scenario. And you would make a gazillion dollars. Like, I don't know how much you'd make. You'd make so much money. But that's not going to happen without indirectly in the prospecting. So think of it as we're going to kind of do some indirectly productive stuff to get to the productive stuff. Okay, so that's where this comes from in terms of me saying, so we had the productive time, indirectly productive, and then non-productive, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so we're gonna head to that in just a second here. Okay, so we have all of these things that we talked about: listing appointments, buyer appointments, negotiating contracts, writing offers, price reductions, closing. All of those things are the productive things, right? The only way we get to those is through the indirectly productive, which is our prospecting. Okay, now, so the most important thing that I want you to take away from what we are talking about today in class is going to be this. If you can have somewhere around 60% of your time spent in those two areas, you will make money, and you'll make good money in this business. The problem that most agents have is, now notice, I'm still allowing for you to have 40% of your time spent non-productively. The problem that most agents have is, I already told you, the average productive agent, what you would determine as productive, meaning that they make a living from real estate, is less than or around 11% productive. So notice that they're spending the majority of their time doing non-productive things. So the now remember, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Remember that? That's this. When work expands to fill the time available for its completion, it's filling it right here in the it doesn't fill it with this or this. It gets filled with this. And a lot of times it comes out of you or somebody else saying, oh, you know what we ought to do is, and we ought to spend some time putting together this program or this marketing piece or whatever is what usually happens. So if you get nothing else out of what we talk about today, take away this. 60% of your time spent at work needs to be spent in these two areas. Now, I'm going to say more about that and explain that a little bit better here in just 1 second. But I just want to make sure to drive home the point that if you leave here not understanding that, you miss the whole point of the class, because this is what you've got to manage, is in terms of managing your time, is making sure that 60% is between these two. Now, we already talked about the way you get the productive stuff is through the prospecting. So that's why they're connected together. See, if I don't have any clients right now, where do I need to spend 60% of my time? Prospecting. Yeah, good. And so how do we do that? So, and in fact, I just realized I forgot. So I will, when we're done here, I will go and get for you guys. I've got a paper that I'm going to give to you to use to track this. Okay. So, and I'm going to share with you next the story of how this impacted me and what it did by me applying it and how I learned this. But before that, let me just say this. The thing you need to do, and so this is the paper that I'm going to give to you afterwards, is you need to keep track of your time that you are spending at work and the activities that you're doing, so that you know if you're spending it productively, indirectly productive, or non-productive. Now, I'm going to ask you to do it and to track it in 15-minute increments. So basically what that looks like is this. Every 15 minutes, you're going to write, I've got on the paper, you're going to have a spot for you to write down what did you do during that 15 minutes. And then you're going to classify it after that as, was it productive? Was it indirectly productive? Or was it non-productive? And then at the end of the day, what you will do is you will total up. So the T, remember, is the total number of hours. So at the end of your work day, you would write down how many hours did I work. Now, just for the sake, remember I told you I'm never going to tell you a number. Just for the sake of us for me to show you this, we're going to just say at the end of the day that I worked 10 hours, just to keep the math easy, okay? So I worked 10 hours at the end of the day. So I'm going to write down on the T that 10 hours of that day was spent working in real estate, okay? Then the next thing I'm going to write down was how many hours did I spend productively? Now remember, productive was listing appointments, buyer appointments, writing contracts, negotiating contracts, going to a closing, showing properties to a buyer that you've got a buyer broker, all of that. So at the end of the day, I'm going to go, okay, how many hours did I spend doing that? Let's just say I did 2 hours of that. Okay. Then I'm going to say, okay, how many hours did I spend indirectly productive? And that's just going to be how many hours did I spend prospecting? Now, in terms of the prospecting, when you're writing down how you spent your time for the 15 minutes, one of the things you're going to notice on this paper that I'm going to give to you, it says on the sidebar, it says power comes out of telling the truth. I am a believer that we get power by telling the truth. Power comes out of telling the truth. So you have to tell the truth and when I say that, it's to yourself, by the way. It's power comes out of telling the truth to yourself. It's when you will tell yourself the truth that you get the power to change things, okay? So you have to, as you write down what you did for the 15 minutes, you got to tell the truth. Meaning, I might be on the phone prospecting and I make one phone call and then I hang up and then Derek and I just start to talk about, maybe I make the phone call and the person's rude to me and I hang up and I'm like, oh, that guy was so rude and here's what he said. And we sit and then talk for 10 minutes of that 15 minutes. When it's time to write down what I did for the 15 minutes, power comes out of telling the truth. What did I do during that 15 minutes?
Talked to Derek for about 12.
Yeah, I
12
talked,
minutes and
so
negative
you're,
minutes on top.
what you're doing is you're looking at like for the 10 out of the 15 minutes, at least 10, what was I really doing during that time? And then write down what you were doing. So if it was talking to Derek and I write down talking to Derek, is that P time, I time, or N?
And CP time.
Yeah, yes, that's probably counterproductive, right? But hopefully not. Hopefully it's not counter. I know.
Terrible advice.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not counterproductive, but that's going to be end time, right? So that's part of where you have to say, okay, I got to tell the truth out of where I spent the time. Okay. So I'm going to write down, okay, how many hours did I spend prospecting during the day? So let's just say that I did 2 hours of prospecting during that 10 hours. Then at the end of the day, what's up? At the end of that day, then I'm going to total, I've totaled up the total hours. I'm going to divide these two into that. So this is why I did 10 hours. So what percentage of my time did I spend between these two areas? 40%, right? So at the end of the day, I would look at that and go, okay, I spent 40% between I and P time, which, by the way, if these two equal 4, what does automatically the N equal? So you'll notice on the paper, I don't have you write down a total number of N time because it's whatever's left over. Whatever is left over of your total hours from these two is N time, okay? So you don't have to stress about what percentage was N because you'll know that based on your I and P. So I spent 40%. Well, if that's the case, what should I learn for me for the next day? Yeah, I got to increase these two. And the only way to increase this one is through the prospecting. So what do I need to spend more time tomorrow doing? Prospecting. Okay, good. Now, that's what you're going to do. Now, let me say this, though. Don't judge one day like that you're a failure. Like if you do this and at the end of the day, you write down, because I mean, for example, today, like you're going to spend somewhere close to, what time is it? 11? Okay. Probably an hour and a half that we're going to spend in here-ish together. Well, at the end of the day, that's every minute that you're sitting in class is end time. So don't judge one day off. Don't judge your real estate career off one day is what I'm saying. In fact, I'm not even saying like for a few days, don't even stress about it. But what you're looking for is what's the pattern. You're looking for on a daily basis, what is the pattern? And here's what I will say is at the end of a month, if you total this up and look at for the month, how much of my time was spent in these areas, what's going to happen is that's going to tell the story. See, the thing that I love about doing this is it tells the story. And in fact, if any one of you were to come to me and say, hey, Russ, will you coach me and will you help me get my business up and running or to the next level? Guess what? The first thing I'm going to do is show me where you're spending your time. I'm going to give you the piece of paper and I'm going to say, okay, go fill this out on a daily basis, showing me where you're spending your time. And I don't even need to see like the every 15 minutes. I just need to see the total at the end of the day of where are you spending your time. Now, because for me, here's what happens is I can just look at this and I would immediately say, we got to get this percentage up. Now, there's two ways to get the percentage up. One is do more prospecting. What's the other way to get the percentage to increase?
Stop talking to Derek.
Okay. Okay, good. Or
set appointments.
Or you're right. Or what else? Work longer. If I work more hours, but I don't prospect anymore, what happens?
Burnout, yeah.
So what's the other way that I could increase this percentage? So let me say it this way. I can either increase these numbers to get this to go up or
Only prospect.
decrease
Decrease.
Oh,
this.
decrease the time. Okay.
So now, again, I'm not telling you a set number of hours. I'm also not saying, oh, well, that's easy, just go home. Like, don't be here as much. But to some extent, I am saying that. So now with that, let me introduce the story of how I learned this lesson. So what happened with me is I was in a class very similar to this. I had the guy that taught me in this writing it on the board, just like what I'm doing for you guys. And he said, I want you to, for the next 2 weeks, I want you to take the paper, although the one he gave me is different than what I'm going to give to you. The one I'm going to give to you is one I created for that I felt like was better. So, but I took that. Now, back then I didn't have a smartwatch. I had a watch that was a Timex. It was an Ironman triathlete watch. That on that watch, it had a timer that you could set it to every 15 minutes beep. And so what happened is then I went to work the next day. As soon as I got to work, I took my watch, I set the timer for 15 minutes and I hit start. And then what would happen, and so this is how I want you guys to do it as well, is I then just started doing whatever it was I was working. Now, so for me at that time, what it looked like is, and I'm not advocating that you do exactly what I'm about to say, because I found out it wasn't the best thing to be doing. But here's what happened. So I got to work, I start the timer, I was working for sale by owners and expired listings. So I went back to the computer at the office and I was sitting down and I was looking up on the MLS all the expired listings. Once I had pulled all the expireds, I went to, back then we had this thick book that was called the cold directory. It was about this thick and it had all of the people's phone numbers, but by street. So I would then go to the streets and look them up. Well, in the process of that, my watch would go beep, 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 beep. Okay. Well, so now let's just say it was, I don't know what time it was. We'll say it was 9 o'clock, whatever it was. Okay. So what have I written down then after that first 15 minutes?
Non-productive.
Well, oh yeah. So first I have to write down, what did I do? So what did I do? So I wrote
Looking for
look
leads.
up expireds. Okay. And then now, Michelle, then I'm going to say, okay, which category is that? Non-productive. So I would just write it in. Okay. So then now 9:15 comes along. I still was looking up expired. So I would go looked up expireds and. Okay. Then at, let's just say 9:30, I got on the phone and started prospecting. So I'm calling expireds. So and then I called expireds, let's just say till 10 o'clock. So I just spent a half an hour of that, and that is what category? Yeah, so I would just put an either. Okay, so then at the end of the day, what I would do is I would go through and go, okay, N doesn't matter really. So I would just total up how many hours did I spend doing I, how many did I spend on the P, and then I would total it up. Okay. So I had been doing that for if I remember right, I started that on a Wednesday. So I did it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and at the end of that, I was kind of like, okay, whatever. The weekend, I had a listing appointment on the weekend, so I'd gotten a new listing. Monday morning, I get to the office, I walk in, I start my timer, I go look up the expireds, and I'm writing down, just like we're doing here. Well, about 9 o'clock, or actually it was probably about 9:30. One of the things that I always recommend to do is as soon as you get a listing, like as soon as you get it, go to the title company, order the preliminary title report. So 9:30, I know that the title company that was connected to the building that I was in, I know that the escrow officer's there. So I jump up and I go walking over and I walk through the door to go in there, and the escrow officer his name is Jeff. He's still a good friend of mine today. I go walking into Jeff. Jeff and I are about the same age. Our two oldest are within months of age of each other. So growing up, we've kind of just stayed close of like, hey, how's sports going with your kid and what happened? So I go walking over there on Monday and I go walk into Jeff's office and I say, Jeff, hey, I got a new listing. And he's like, awesome, give me the information. So I give him all the info and all the information about the listing. He takes it And then he says, so how did, I don't remember what sport was going on at the time, basketball, football, or baseball. And he says, hey, so what happened with your son with, we'll just say it was basketball this weekend. And I go, oh yeah, so I start telling him about that. And then I said, well, what about Dallin? What happened with you guys? Oh, and he tells me about that. And every 15 minutes, my watch, beep, so I'm doing this. So I'm sitting there talking to Jeff, it beeps and I reset it. We're sitting there talking, it beeps and I reset it. So I finally get done talking to Jeff about, the weekend and blah, 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 and all this stuff. I go walking back to my office and I still remember exactly where I was at in the office. As I'm walking along, where the bathrooms were, the men and the women's, or men's here, women's here, I'm right in front of where the two bathrooms are. My watch beeps and I go, oh yeah, I got to record my time. And I hit the button. I kept walking. I go past the 3 offices that are before mine. I turn into my office. I sit down and I pull out this paper to write down what I had done. So I write down, I get to here and I write down order PR. So what would that fall under? Ordering a preliminary title report.
That's P, right?
That's them.
And
Oh.
non-productive. Then I talked with Jeff. Talked with Jeff. I had spent 2 hours over talking to, I went to order a preliminary title report, which is end time. Should have taken 15 minutes. I spent the other hour and 45 minutes just talking. And I had to go, okay. And I'll tell you what, that day was the day that this process transformed my real estate career, because that day I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. Like, I love Jeff. In fact, he and I are going to lunch tomorrow. He texted me yesterday and said, let's go to lunch. I am going to lunch tomorrow. Still to this day, love the guy. But I was like, do I really want to spend 2 hours of my workday visiting with Jeff about stuff? Now, remember, I said there's 2 ways to increase this. So I stopped and said to myself, okay, would I rather have that 2 hours to just go and visit with Jeff, or would I rather not be working during, like, maybe I should have gone golfing with him or something out that wasn't considered work. Does that make sense?
On the weekend.
Yeah, on the weekend or whatever. Like, so to some extent, like, I realized that day, if I cut that out and went home early, I could have changed that from 10 to 8. And all of a sudden this percentage jumps up.
Mhm.
So again, I'm not saying, like, remember I told you, I'm never going to tell you got to work a certain number of hours. What's more important is the percentage. Now, with that being said though, like, it's probably not going to work to say, okay, well, I'm just going to work like 3 hours every day then, and I'll prospect for 2 hours and then I'll go on 1 appointment every day. Although technically, if you truly did that, it would work.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, if you could prospect for 2 hours and go on 1 appointment every day, you would make a ton of money in the business. But you still you still have to go order a preliminary title report, which is end time. You're gonna have to do CMAs. Those are end time. All of those things are end time, but that doesn't mean they're not important.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So it's not, what I'm saying is, it's early on, you're not going to be able to do this where you can just say, well, all I'm going to do is I time and P time. That's like all I'm going to do is those 2 things, because unfortunately, it looks like this. Well, let me say it this way. This is what most people's career in real estate looks like. They have a lot of money, then they have no money. They have a lot of money, then they have no money. They have a lot of money, they have no money. Now, here's why. The reason that happens is because of this. So based on what I just told you guys, I need to make sure that I'm prospecting every day, right? So, okay, so I start prospecting and I do I time. What should indirectly productive or the I time generate?
Okay.
P time, right? Okay, so good. So I'm doing I time, so then I get some productive. Guess what productive time generates?
Paycheck.
Well, it does generate a paycheck, but it also generates non-productive time. Because as the moment you get a listing, what do you have to do?
Set it all up.
I gotta get it set up and I gotta order photography and I gotta do that, and I gotta, I gotta do all of this end time stuff. So now I've done all this prospecting and I now have gotten an appointment. Now, the other thing that happens with agents early on is as soon as you get an appointment for a listing, what do you immediately want to do?
Celebrate.
Yeah, and
Stop prospecting.
stop prospecting because you want to do, you got to go do what?
You're non-productive.
I got to go do the research on I got a listing appointment and I got to go find out how much is the house worth. So I need to do a CMA and I got to do, so we do all of that stuff, which now then turns into end time. And guess what? We quit doing.
The indirect.
We stopped doing the indirectly productive stuff because I got an appointment and then I have, another P time appointment because of that. And I got some more end time to do. And then now I got to do more end time. And then guess what this moment right here is?
When you close
Yep.
and get your check.
And it's called, oh shit.
Now we're gonna-
That's the oh shit moment right there. Because why?
Now you have to start over.
Because now I got to start all over again. And now I don't have anything else. So I start prospecting. And I prospect and prospecting leads to what? To productive time. No, so now I get some more productive time, which then leads to non-productive time. And then we just keep this cycle going over and over again. So if you don't want this to be your career, which honestly, this is what most agents' real estate career looks like. Make a lot of money, have no money. Make a lot of money, have no money. The reason is because this is what happens. So if you don't want that to happen, you have to manage this. Now, of these two, which one is more important?
Indirect,
Why? You're right. Why?
because
Because
you
it's
need,
what
you need
generates.
to have that, yeah, to get
'Cause-
productive.
Yeah, because notice, that's the piece that goes away for the people who are doing this. The piece that they quit doing is the indirectly productive. So here's what I'm saying to you. As you build out your schedule, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute, as you build out your schedule for the day, you have to make sure that you protect that indirectly productive or the prospecting time. You have to protect it because nobody else will. Nobody else cares about it. Nobody cares about your prospecting time. And in fact, let me even say it this way. Watch this. So let's say that I start doing this 15-minute tracking and I'm prospecting, okay? And I'm, what?
I just said, tell Michelle to stop talking to me.
Stop talking to her.
We can have a wall between us.
Yeah, okay, so, now, what was I doing? I lost.
Protect your.
Oh, protect your presence, yes, okay. So here's what happens. So, in fact, actually, let's just do this over here. So here's what the ideal schedule should look like. Is 7 o'clock is role play, whether you do it in person or on Zoom, but do that. 8 o'clock, morning ascent. 9 o'clock should be your prospecting time. Basically 9 until noon is prospecting time. Noon is lunch. 1 o'clock is lead follow-up. 2 o'clock is appointment prep time. 3 o'clock is your first appointment prep, sorry. 3 o'clock is an appointment slot, and 5 o'clock. This is Brian Burnett's schedule that is our top producing agent. Essentially, that's what he does. Okay. So now here's the most important thing. The most important thing on your schedule is this. Now, let me ask you though. I'm going to set up a scenario for you guys and you tell me what you would do. Okay. So let's say that I'm prospecting here. And my objective in prospecting is to fill these appointment slots, not necessarily today, but days down the road, is to just fill those appointment slots. What can you not read?
The 1 o'clock.
Lead follow-up. Yeah, lead follow-up, sorry. So my objective is to fill these appointment slots, okay? So let's say that I'm prospecting and I come across somebody that wants to meet with me to list their house. So I'm gonna say a listing appointment here, and the price of that property that I'm gonna get a listing appointment for is $650,000. Okay. I keep prospecting. And in the process of my prospecting, I come across a potential listing that's $2 million. And the guy says to me, yeah, but I can only meet at 3:00. But I already have a 3:00 appointment. So what are you gonna do? You get an opportunity for a $2 million listing. Well, let's make it $5 million. $5 million listing. And the guy's like, I'm desperate. I gotta get it sold really quick.
First thing I would do is just call to see if the 650 can move to 5. If they can, then you're good. If they can't,
Then what?
then another day.
Okay.
You know?
Okay, good. So notice that. Here's the main thing I want you guys to notice. You're not gonna just no-show this appointment. You're not gonna call and just cancel, right? You're gonna call and say, hey, can I reschedule? Okay. I want you to treat this prospecting time wherever you allocate it. So I don't care what your schedule looks like. You just have to schedule in prospecting time, lead follow-up, appointment prep, and spots for appointments. Okay, whatever that's going to look like for you, get that scheduled. Create a schedule for you. And every day doesn't have to be the same, by the way. Just, for a week, create the schedule. Like I always loved using the Chick-fil-A, like they know they're closed on Sunday, which, by the way, you should have at least one day of the week, have one day at minimum that you just say, I'm not doing anything real estate. Now, so for me, let me tell you how and again, I'm not saying you should do this, but I'll tell you how I did it. Is I had set up my schedule to where after 8:00 on a weekday, I'm not doing real estate at all. And on Sunday, I'm not doing real estate at all. So my voicemail on my phone said, hey, this is Russ with Century 21, blah, blah, blah. If it's after 8 p.m. or Sunday, I will call you the next business day. I set that up so that anytime somebody called me, if they got my voicemail, they knew if it's after 8 p.m. or Sunday, I'll call you the next business day. Now here's the thing. Clients would call and know after 8 p.m. like I would get a message, hey, I know it's after 8:00, no worries, call me tomorrow. Like I just had it set up to where if it's after 8 p.m. or Sunday, I'll call you the next business day. If it's after 8 p.m. or Sunday. So people didn't expect me to ever go and do anything because they just knew those are the days that I don't work or the times that I don't work. Now, okay, so now let's go back to this. So now let me give you, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to know on that sets you up to under promise and over deliver too.
Correct.
Because in their mind, after 8, you're not doing anything, or on Sunday, you're not doing anything.
That's right.
Let's say that you do.
And I
Well,
did.
They weren't expecting.
There
it.
were times
Now
that I
you're
would.
overpromising.
Yep. And you're right. There were times somebody would call me after 8 p.m. and be like, hey, I know you can call me tomorrow, but that I sometimes would just because I then knew I would sleep better if I called them back. I would call them back and say, hey, just want to let you know, I got your message. Yes, this is what's going. So you're right on. Yeah. So, all right. Now let me ask you this question. So I'm prospecting, and I come across a listing opportunity, any price, doesn't matter. And they say, I could only meet between 9 and noon. What are you going to do?
You can also reschedule your prospecting time because it didn't have to be specific hours, right? So you set your appointment. And put
Perfect.
prospecting where
Good.
your appointment was.
That's the next thing I want to make sure you guys understand from this is you have to treat your prospecting as an appointment. In fact, treat it like that $1 million listing because that's where your business is going to come from. So here's the thing. If somebody wants to meet with me during that time, I'm going to say, first thing I'm going to say is no different than this. Meaning if I had that $5 million listing, I'm probably going to say, oh, I've got an appointment at 3:00. Could we do it at 5? And they say, no, we can't do it at 5. I can only do it at 3. And like I told you, this is urgent. I got to get this property sold. Like I need somebody out today. I'm going to go, okay, let me call and reschedule that appointment. What I'm asking you to do is treat this like that appointment. Don't ever no-show your prospecting. treat it like that. So yeah, if they said, well, I could only meet at 11 o'clock, great. Then I'm going to take the 11 o'clock portion of my prospecting and throw it in right there. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm not available for that appointment. Well, assuming this wasn't already there. I'm not available for that appointment. So now I'm going to prospect. Treat your prospecting like an appointment. Protect it. And I would say protect it more than an appointment. Meaning you would never just not show up to an appointment. Don't ever not show up to your prospecting, and recognize you have to reschedule it. If something's coming up during it, you got to reschedule. That makes sense? All right. Any questions on that part? Okay.
I have a quick question,
Yes.
kind of random. Do you do any prospecting training, like ways to prospect? And
Did Jason not do that on Thursday?
I wasn't here.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, did,
He did, he went over quite a few ways of.
okay.
I think I might have got on the Zoom, but I had to get off early. So I know he's going over lead sources. Just like actual ways to bring up the conversation and,
Yeah.
ways to do it.
So,
SOI,
so
ways
the
to-
answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Typically, the lead generation class typically is a 2-day class, and typically I would have done Tuesday and then Thursday, but last week was,
Oh, wait.
yeah. And the other problem is somebody else was supposed to teach the first part of the class, and then it fell through, which is why I then had to say sorry. So, so the answer is yes.
Okay.
And so available on YouTube if you want to get it before, but I'm also happy, if you want to schedule some time, I'm happy to sit down with you and go through that as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm happy to do that. Okay, what other questions on, so what we've hit so far? Anything, question wise? How about on Zoom? You guys still alive?
Yeah, we're doing great.
Yeah, good job.
I had the sound turned down so much. If you had been talking, I wouldn't have heard you. Now it's up. So if you do, okay, good. You guys are there. No questions. All right. Trying to think. I feel like I'm forgetting something. That's why I'm like, did I leave something out that you guys aren't understanding? What am I missing? I think that pretty much does cover it. So, okay, so I'm gonna grab for you guys that, and then for you guys on Zoom, is anybody on their phone, not on a computer that's on Zoom? Or are you all on a computer?
I'm on my phone.
Okay. So, because I can upload it onto the chat box. So if you, for Megan, will you just shoot me an email or put it in your email in the chat box, and then when I print it, I'll remember to send it to you?
Sure thing. Thank you.
Yep. So I'm gonna go, I don't know if I can print from here. So I'll run to my computer real quick and print for you guys the tracking sheet for it. But so here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. Start keeping track of your time based on that. So every 15 minutes, oh, that's what I just remembered. Okay, here's what I had left out, which the way that an attorney does this, by the way, so I used to feel bad asking you guys to track it every 15 minutes because having done it, I'm like, I sometimes felt like I'm spending as much time writing down what I did as what I did. And so I was feeling guilty. And a lot of times when I would teach the class, I'd be like, well, if you don't have to do it every 15 minutes. But then I was talking to an attorney about this process. And I wasn't really even talking to him from the standpoint of like learning what I'm about to share with you. But I don't even know how we got into the conversation, but I was talking about asking the agents to track every 15 minutes. And he said, well, do you realize that as an attorney, for attorneys, we have to track it every 6 minutes. So attorneys have to get, when they start, they have to get so many billable hours. So for example, if they were supposed to get 8 billable hours in a day, it might take them 12 hours to get the 8 billable hours. They might have to work 12 hours to get 8 billable hours in, because they have to write it down. They have to be able to show every 6 minutes what they were doing for that particular client. If they're going to give them a bill of however many thousands of dollars, they have to be able to show, here's what I did every 6 minutes to work on your case, which then made me go, okay, I don't feel bad telling you guys to track every 15 minutes. So stop and think about the income that an attorney gets from tracking every 6 minutes. I'm telling you, if you will track your time by this every 15-minute segment, it will make a huge impact, because what you're going to find out at the end of the day is, well, here's the challenge. Here's the struggle that I've found. Most of the time when I ask agents to do this, they don't do it. And they'll start it, but then they find out really fast, they waste a lot of time. And for me, that's what I found out is the moment that I figured out, I spent 2 hours with Jeff just talking to him. And I was like, okay, like if I had to go home and hand to my wife, here's what I did all day at work today, and she saw that, she would have been like, are you kidding me? So to some extent, imagine if you had to show to your clients, here's where I spend my time. Now, actually, let's even take this to that level. Imagine how powerful it would be to go on a listing appointment and say to the seller, let me give you a copy of what I do on a daily basis and show you what I do. Now, here's what I would say under this prospecting time. I wouldn't write it as prospecting. If I was going to do that, I would put it as looking for a buyer for my sellers or something right in here. Because if you're calling around a just listed, like doing just listed phone calls, so there's one idea for you, Delaney, is calling around a listing and saying, hey, we've just listed this home. Who do you know that wants to move into the area? Like if you wrote it down that way and went to a seller and just said, here's what I do. Here's my schedule. This is what I do during the day. And I'm going to spend every day from 9 until 12 calling, trying to find a buyer for your house. Like, and then imagine if you had to actually go show them where you're really spending your time and what you actually did. Like, meaning this is, I guess, think of it this way. This is my plan. Then when I write out my every 15 minutes, this is what I actually did. Imagine if you had to report that to your significant other or clients to say, here's what I did all day today. And for me, that was eye-opening to realize, like, I was spending a lot of my day doing stuff that didn't matter, to where, especially this type of non-productive stuff, to go, okay, then I could just cut it out. So now, the last piece that I want to hit on with this, because you had brought up earlier, Michelle, or I think it was you, said something about hire somebody.
Mhm.
The way you know when it's time to hire an assistant is through tracking your time. Because what happens is when we already talked about over here, the more productive time, the more appointments you get with buyers and sellers to go do transactions and contracts, the more end time that gets created. And so part of how you know when it's time to go and hire an assistant is you track your time. And when you're finding that you're doing important, non-productive stuff, not non-important, talking to Jeff, but when you're spending the time doing paperwork and CMAs and all that kind of stuff, and you're noticing that it's hurting you, here's what I want you to keep in mind, is if you kept track of the amount of money you make in a year and divided that into the number of hours you spend in productive time, what would you guess your income per hour is here? For every hour that you're in front of a client in a selling situation, gonna ask them to sign something, how much, if you took your whole income and divided it into the number of hours, how much per hour would you guess you're getting paid for that?
Not that much.
Not much?
It seems like it would, because you're doing the indirect first before you do.
Well, don't worry about that. I'm just saying,
Oh.
if at the end of the year you said I made $100,000 and I had gone on 100 hours worth of appointments.
Like $100 an hour.
Actually, what you're gonna find, and now this varies based on the price range of the properties that you're doing, but I always say it's between $500 and $1,000 per hour. Okay, is you're getting paid. So if you took all of the appointments you went on, divided the number of hours you spend at those into your income, you're gonna be making somewhere, and it's probably closer to the 1,000 now with what our prices have done recently. But it's somewhere between $500 and $1,000 an hour. Now, guess how much money you are making if you took that same income and divided it into the number of hours of end time that you do?
$10 an hour.
Yeah, it's typically $12 to $15 an hour. So here's part of what I want you to see is, so that's where, when you were saying hire somebody, that's when you can look at it and go, every hour that I'm spending doing a CMA, doing busy work, creating a flyer, all that kind of stuff, I'm essentially making $12 to $15 an hour, but every hour that I'm in front of a client in a selling situation, I'm making between $500 and $1,000 per hour. It doesn't take very long to figure out, I gotta go hire somebody, because you could hire somebody to do this, even if you paid them $20 an hour to do this. If you recognize it frees you up to do this or this. And unfortunately, we don't really know this necessarily, but I would say it's somewhere in the $125 an hour. If you took your income and divided it into the number of hours you're prospecting, you're making about $125 an hour. So keep that in mind as you're filling out this sheet and writing down what you're doing. Every time you're putting an in, I could have been paying somebody $20 an hour to do that, so that I could be spending the time either here or here. And the more time you spend here, the more money you make. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was the key piece that I was like, I'm forgetting something, was that. So, all right. Questions, comments, thoughts?
I would think that eventually we could hire someone to do the prospecting too.
Well, so yes, I mean, that's just it. That's where I guess I'm saying is, if you really could look at it and say, if I could spend all day, every day in closings, making, then you'd be making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 an hour.
That's what I'm saying.
So then, yes, and we actually do have some agents in, well, we have one agent in this office, Justin Udy. Do you guys know who he is? But he essentially, that's kind of what he had set his business up, is he has a team that is kind of set up to where he's got people that are doing this, and he's got a bunch of agents that do this. And then he actually was paying an agent to go out on the listing appointments, that she would just go out and do listing appointments pretty much all day was her. And when I say all day, it was probably 2 or 3 appointments a day, but she would go out on listing appointments and he would essentially just attend the closings, and he made close to $1 million. So yeah, you're getting the concept of this though, right on, is that the sooner I can pay somebody to do this stuff, I can spend more time doing this and this. Then down the road, yeah, you could start to pay somebody to go do this for you, so that all you do is this, and then eventually all you're doing is closing. So that's the process. So good thought. What else?
There's a really good book.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's a really good book called Who Not How, and it talks about, making your time work for you by hiring other people to do those things. So I love that these concepts are shared here too, is that, oh crap, I just forgot the author of it, but it's called Who Not How.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll check that out. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. So if you guys want to hang for a minute, I'll go print off some of those to get for you guys. And then I'll also, actually, let me see if I can do it from here. See if I can.